Hi, I'm Tanya. I was supposed to be the bride, but my wedding turned into my sister's engagement party because she finally found someone. The invitation didn't have my name. The cake said Annie Mark. My mom told the MC to skip my vows. I stood in front of everyone, in silence. Do you know what it feels like to be erased from your own story by the people who raised you? Charleston was blooming the way it always did in April, azaleas spilling over wrought iron fences, magnolia trees swaying in soft coastal winds, the kind of setting people imagined when they dreamed of southern weddings. I used to picture myself walking down one of those cobbled paths, my hand on my father's arm, the guests seated on either side with linen fans and iced tea in hand. And now, it was finally happening. My wedding. Or so I thought. I had booked the venue 9 months ago, Riverfront Hall, an old plantation-turned event space just outside the historic district. It wasn't over the top, but it had charm, the kind that made you feel like you were stepping into a memory before it even became one. For once, the celebration was going to be about me, Tanya Denise Jackson, 34, steady job, no kids, but madly in love with a man who saw me, even when others didn't. It wasn't just about getting married. It was about finally asking my family to show up for something that mattered to me. And I had allowed myself to hope, which is probably why the words that came next hit like a slap dressed in pearls and politeness. "You know what would be really lovely?" my mother said, sipping her sweet tea at the corner table of Magnolia's downtown, where we met for the final planning lunch. I didn't answer. I'd heard that tone before, where suggestion wasn't really suggestion, it was packaging. She continued, smiling toward my sister. Why not include Annie's engagement announcement at the reception? Just a short moment, a toast. People love surprises. My fork paused midair. This is supposed to be my one day. Oh, honey, it still is, she cooed. You're just sharing a little joy. Isn't that what family does? Annie didn't say anything. She just smiled, that polite, practiced smile of someone who knew she didn't have to ask for space. It would always be given to her. My chest felt tight, but I didn't argue. Not yet. The next morning, I was at work when my phone buzzed. It was Dad. Rare for him to call mid-morning. Hi, Dad. Everything okay? I just wanted to let you know we had to move the wedding up. I sat up straight. What? He sighed like this was inconvenient for him. Mark, Annie's fiancé. He's getting called out for a work assignment. Overseas, short term. So we figured if we moved the date a week earlier, he could still make it for the engagement bit. I blinked at my screen. You figured? Well, your mom and we thought it would be best. Most guests can adjust. You'll be fine, right? That word, fine. The catch-all for emotional labor. I guess I don't get a say. He laughed nervously. Don't be dramatic. It's just logistics. After we hung up, I sat for a long time, staring at my coffee mug, now cold. I kept thinking about a quote from Elizabeth Warren. If you're not at the table, you're on the menu. It had never felt so real, because somehow my wedding had turned into their opportunity. Later that night, I opened a box of keepsakes, photos, ribbons, a few notes from childhood. I wasn't sure what I was looking for, maybe evidence that this pattern had always existed, and I found it. There was the program from my 9th birthday, the year my party was postponed because Annie had a regional dance recital. And there was the graduation trip that was rebranded as a much-needed family vacation when Annie got dumped 2 days before. I had learned to be okay with the background, to nod, smile, applaud. But the older I got, the more the applause sounded like silence. Am I still the supporting act in my own life? I tried to shake it off, but that night, while Deborah was finishing dinner, I opened my email. My heart stuttered. The digital version of our wedding invitation had arrived, and my name wasn't on it. At the top, in swirling gold calligraphy, it read, "Please join us for a celebration of love, Annie Mark's engagement." My hands went cold. I scrolled again, slower this time, hoping I'd missed something. Nothing. There was no mention of me or Deborah or the word wedding. Just florals, glitter, and their names front and center. I didn't scream. I didn't call. I didn't cry. I just sat there, the monitor's light casting shadows on the walls behind me. I thought it was just a suggestion. I didn't know it was already done. The day after seeing the wedding invite that had my name erased from it, I did what any bride would do. I tried to hold on to some semblance of control. There was one part of the wedding untouched so far, the dress. Mine was hanging at Southern Elegance Bridal, a boutique tucked away between two old churches in downtown Charleston. I had picked it months ago, simple lines, a subtle train, soft lace along the sleeves. It made me feel like myself. Not flashy, not fussy, just centered. I arrived at the boutique early, hoping to beat the crowd. The assistant recognized me, offered tea, and led me to the fitting room. The dress was already steamed and waiting. For a few quiet minutes, it felt like a normal bride's moment, until I stepped into the showroom and noticed something off. There was a second dress rack, another white gown, equally elegant but flashier. More sequins, deep neckline, definitely not mine. And there, clipped to the hanger, was a tag. Reserved Annie. Before I could ask, the bell jingled behind me. My sister walked in, glowing like she owned the place. "Tanya," she sang out, "doesn't it look amazing? We'll look like bridal twins." I blinked. "Excuse me?" She moved past me and ran her hand down the bodice of the dress. "I talked to Mom. We figured it'd be iconic. Two sisters, same aisle, both in white. People will never forget it." I tried not to raise my voice. "Annie, this isn't prom. This is my wedding." She just smiled, like I was being difficult again. "Exactly. It's a wedding. Love is love." I turned to the boutique assistant. "I wasn't told there'd be a second gown. Who approved this?" She looked at her clipboard, uncomfortable. "Your mother came in yesterday." She confirmed the change and signed off on the reservation. I walked out of the showroom without saying another word. Not because I didn't have one, because I didn't trust myself to say something I couldn't unsay. The photographer meeting was scheduled right after, and I hoped it would go better. I needed one win, something to prove I hadn't completely lost my grasp on the day I spent months planning. The studio was cool and dimly lit, with framed canvas portraits along every wall. I sat down at the presentation table across from Jonah, the photographer I'd hired based on referrals and one glowing article in a local magazine. He opened his laptop and clicked through a slideshow. "There's a rough mock-up of the wedding album," he said. "Still need your final sign-off." As images began flashing across the screen, my stomach sank. Annie on the staircase. Annie holding Mark's hand. Annie laughing in a field. More Annie. I sat frozen. "Where are my shots?" Jonah blinked. "I'm sorry?" "I don't see any solo portraits of me. None with Deborah. Barely any of the actual ceremony prep." He paused. "Oh, the shot list came from your mother." She emphasized focusing on Annie's surprise engagement, said to prioritize what guests will remember. I stood up, fighting to keep my composure. "Please pull the list I sent originally." He hesitated, then opened his inbox. My original instructions were there. Clear, detailed, personal. Jonah scratched his head. "I don't know how that got overwritten. I assumed your mom was updating it." She wasn't. I gathered my purse. "Redo it, from scratch, based on my list." He nodded slowly. "Of course." As I left, I realized I wasn't angry. I was hollow. And that was worse. That night, I met Simone at our usual wine bar off Broad Street. It was a small place, flickering candles, brick walls, quiet jazz in the background. We'd been meeting there since college. If there was one person who could see through my practiced smile, it was her. "So," she said, "how's bride life?" I forced a chuckle. "Ever seen someone vanish from their own wedding while still standing there?" She leaned in. "What happened now?" I told her everything. The invite, the dress, the photos, all of it. Simone's eyes widened. "Tanya, that's not just inconsiderate, that's calculated." "I don't want to start a war." She set her glass down. "Tanya, you're already losing it, silently. If you don't speak now, you'll vanish from your own story." I looked at the paper menu, pretending to read. You know I've spent years trying not to cause trouble. That was the expectation. Be agreeable. Be manageable. She didn't flinch. You know what Maya Angelou said? When someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. I nodded slowly. I believed them. I just kept giving them second chances. After we paid, I walked home under the amber glow of streetlights. Charleston at night could be quiet and haunting all at once. As soon as I got inside, I grabbed my journal and opened a fresh page. At the top, I wrote, "Proof I'm being erased." Below that, I started listing, no name on the invite. Annie's gown at the boutique. Photographer's list altered. Solo shots missing. Mother's approvals without consent. Each bullet was a weight removed from my chest. Later, I stood by the window in my bedroom, staring at the dress I had loved for months. It was still there, mine, untouched, but suddenly felt like a costume in a play I hadn't auditioned for. I whispered aloud the words I should have said earlier. "This isn't your day, Annie, and it's not yours either, Mom." In the quiet that followed, I heard the power in my own voice. I'm tired of being the agreeable daughter. It wasn't a scream. It didn't have to be. The next morning, as the first sunlight crept across the hardwood floor, my phone chimed. I reached for it, half awake. It was an email from the wedding planner. Subject, Final Ceremony Notes, Dual Processional Schedule attached. I opened the PDF. 2 names, 2 entrances, 2 brides, 1 aisle. I stared at the PDF like it had slapped me across the face. I'd seen the gold header enough times now to know it wasn't some formatting error or a joke. Celebrating the engagement of Annie Mark. That was it. Not a mention of me, not my name, not Deborah's, not a single hint that this event had at one point been about a wedding, my wedding. I picked up the phone and called the wedding planner, voice calm but tight. "Hi, this is Tanya Jackson. I just opened the invitation file and—" "Yes," she interrupted quickly, sounding almost relieved. "Your mother sent us final approval. I was told everything was cleared. Is there a problem?" "A problem?" I opened my mouth, then closed it again. "No, that's all." I hung up, pulled up my messages, and forwarded the PDF to Deborah. Within seconds, the typing bubble appeared. "Didn't you design this with them?" I didn't answer right away. What could I say that wouldn't sound like a breakdown? Instead, I texted, "I thought I did." What I didn't say was that I felt like a ghost in my own life. This wasn't about typography or layout. This was deliberate, or worse, it was indifferent. I wasn't just forgotten, I was removed. And the difference between the two is what made it feel personal. I closed my laptop, leaned back, recalled a quote I hadn't thought of in years, one that my high school English teacher had taped to her wall. "No one can make you feel inferior without your consent." Eleanor Roosevelt had said it, and back then, I thought it sounded strong, brave even. But in that moment, I understood the deeper wound, that before someone else makes you feel inferior, they usually make sure no one's even looking your way. I didn't cry. Instead, I poured a glass of water, sat on the edge of the bed, and let my thoughts drift back. Because this wasn't new. At Annie's graduation party, I'd just landed a job I worked my tail off for. But within 10 minutes of walking into the backyard, Annie stood up and announced she'd been offered a position in a startup in Austin. Champagne popped. Everyone clapped. My news. Lost in the confetti. When I got promoted to assistant director, my first major title shift, no one from the family came to the small reception my office threw. Mom texted me the next day. "Sorry, sweetie, Annie's dealing with the breakup. It was a rough night." I was 29, fully grown, still waiting to be seen. These weren't accidents. They were habits, and habits are harder to fix than mistakes. That afternoon, I drove out to Dad's place. He lived alone now, after his second divorce, in a quiet neighborhood that smelled like cedar mulch and lawn fertilizer. He greeted me in his usual half-hug, always one arm, never two. "Didn't expect you," he said, leading me to the kitchen. "Coffee?" "Sure." I sat at the counter. Watched him shuffle around like he was building time with sugar packets and spoons. When the mugs hit the table, I laid it out. The invitation, the dress, the photo session, all of it. He didn't interrupt, but he didn't offer outrage either, just kept nodding and murmuring. Finally, I asked, "Do you think I'm overreacting?" He sighed. "It's just, Annie's engagement is fragile. She's had a tough time. I think your mother just wants to help her feel secure." "So I'm supposed to play therapist and bridesmaid at my own wedding?" "Tanya, no. Answer me. Is that what you think?" He stared into his cup. "I think it's not worth turning into a family war." I pushed back from the counter. "It already is. I just didn't declare it." He stood too, hands on the granite. "You've always been the strong one." That line, the classic, the curse dressed as a compliment. "Strength doesn't mean invisible, Dad." He didn't answer. Just mumbled something about needing to check on the grill, even though it was empty and cold. I left without finishing my coffee. That night, I sat on my living room floor with my laptop balanced on my knees. I opened my email, typed a message to my mother. "I want the invitation corrected, immediately." No fluff, no, "Hi, Mom," just the ask. Her reply came in under 10 minutes. "Sweetheart, people already got the version. It's too late now. Everyone's excited about the engagement. Don't ruin it with drama." Drama. I stared at the word like it was a slur. It had always been her go-to dismissal. If Annie cried, it was a crisis. If I got mad, it was drama. That was when the shift happened. Not loudly, but in layers. I realized I was speaking into a void. My words didn't matter here. My feelings were just static, so I deleted the thread, emptied the trash folder. Then I walked into my closet, pulled out an old white frame, and printed the invite on plain cardstock. I hung it behind the door, out of sight, where only I would see it. It wasn't just a reminder, it was a receipt. Later, as the sun went down and Deborah finished a call in the other room, I sat down again, this time not to fix anything. I opened a blank document, and I started typing. Not a complaint, not a manifesto, a resignation letter, not to my job, to my role in this family. The pre-wedding brunch was held at a small, sunlit venue my father had picked, something about the oak trees out back reminding him of family reunions we hadn't had in years. I arrived with Deborah, trying to ignore the subtle weight in my chest. The table was set for 30. I recognized faces from both sides of the family and a few distant relatives I barely knew. Everyone smiled at me, warm and cordial, but I noticed something else. The centerpiece said, "Celebrating Annie Mark." Not Tanya Deborah. I didn't say anything. I needed to pick my moment. Maybe I was still hoping for a correction, something to suggest this wasn't intentional. After the appetizers were cleared, Dad stood to make a toast. He held his glass in one hand, his phone in the other, which he squinted at before clearing his throat. "I just want to say," he began, "how proud we are that Annie has finally found love. She's been through a lot, and seeing her and Mark together, it's a blessing." I waited. That was the setup. Surely the next sentence would mention me, but it didn't. He raised his glass. "To Annie and Mark." Cheers erupted. Clinks of glasses. Laughter. I didn't move. My name never came. I looked around. Faces glowing, leaning toward Annie like moths to a flame. Even Deborah looked confused. I clenched the stem of my champagne glass so tight I thought it might snap. The room had erased me in real time, like I was furniture, like I was fine with being the backdrop. That evening, I called Simone, my best friend since freshman year of college. We hadn't spoken in a few days, and I needed to hear a voice that still knew my middle name. "Why haven't I gotten the invite yet?" she asked the second she answered. I frowned. "What?" She laughed, thinking it was a joke. "You know, the wedding invite. I've been checking the mail like a teenager waiting for college letters." I pulled up the guest list on my phone, scrolled. Her name wasn't there. I froze. Then called my mother. She picked up immediately. "Sweetheart, everything okay?" "Simone didn't get an invitation." A pause. "Oh, well, she brings a lot of energy to events, and this isn't that kind of celebration. You deserve something calmer." I was silent. She filled the space. It's your special day. We just want everything. Dignified. That word. Dignified. As if Simone's personality were a liability. I hung up without saying goodbye. This wasn't forgetfulness. This was strategy. I texted Simone. Come anyway, I'll fix it. But the message felt hollow. I couldn't fix something that was never broken. I was being managed, trimmed down to a version that fit their narrative. The next night, I sent a dinner invitation. Just Mom, Annie, and me. No guests, no handlers. I chose a quiet place off King Street, one with dim lighting and no wine menu designed to impress. I didn't want distractions. They arrived together. Annie in a floral dress, Mom in something linen and pastel. They were already laughing when they sat. I didn't waste time. I need to talk to both of you. Mom gave her automatic smile. Of course, darling. But let's at least order first. No. Now. They both leaned back slightly. I pulled a small notebook from my purse and placed it on the table. This is a list of everything you've overridden. The invitation, the dress, the photographer's shot list, the brunch toast, the guest list, and now, the processional. Annie blinked. What processional? You didn't know? I raised an eyebrow. Apparently, we're both walking down the aisle. Annie looked at Mom, who shrugged, too casual. It's symbolic, she said. Sisters supporting each other. I stared at her. You're turning my wedding into a stage for Annie's redemption arc, and I won't play the understudy anymore. Annie scoffed. You always make things so dramatic. I smiled. Not warmly. You won't get another warning. I paid the bill. No one protested. That night, I went home, pulled the original invite from my inbox, the one that had my name on it, and printed 2 copies. One I mailed to myself, the other to my mother. No message, just the paper. Then I called the venue and spoke with Marcia, the coordinator. I need all decor and setup instructions paused. Marcia hesitated. Is there an issue? Yes, I said. There's only going to be one table I care about, mine and Deborah's. Everything else can wait. She didn't argue. I sat at my kitchen table and waited for the fallout. It didn't take long. The next morning, my phone buzzed. An email from the venue. Subject: additional decorations ordered by mother of the bride. Attached were photos of centerpieces, roses, gold placards, and initials. A.M., Annie, and Mark. I whispered to no one. They think I'm bluffing. But I wasn't. 3 days before the wedding, Deborah and I pulled into the rehearsal dinner venue just past noon. The sun hovered over Charleston with its usual weight, warm but deceptive, like a smile hiding teeth. I stepped out of the car, adjusting my skirt, willing my jaw to stay relaxed. I hadn't said a word since we left the house. Deborah had filled the silence with small talk. The weather, parking, a podcast he'd listened to the night before. I let him. I didn't have the energy to mask much. The front desk was manned by a woman with perfect posture and a clipboard that looked like it hadn't left her hand in years. She smiled with polished hospitality. You must be here for your sister's big day, she said brightly. Are you one of the bridesmaids? I didn't flinch. I didn't need to. Deborah's hand on mine tightened instantly. I answered evenly, without looking at her. I'm the bride. Her face blanched. The smile faltered. Oh, I'm so sorry. I just assumed, she stammered, flipping through pages, trying to hide her embarrassment behind administrative chaos. It's fine, I said, already walking past her. But it wasn't fine, not even close. It wasn't just my family anymore. It was the whole narrative. The rehearsal dinner was set on the 2nd floor of a historic building near the market. Brick walls, vintage chandeliers, round tables dressed in muted colors. People were already arriving. Uncles with bourbon laughs, co-workers with polite wine, cousins I hadn't seen since Annie's last breakup. The room buzzed with conversation, clinking glasses, and scattered laughter. I walked from table to table, acknowledging greetings, nodding at people who acted like I was the +1, and then I heard it. I thought Annie was the one getting married. Another voice. Didn't realize Tanya was even still with that guy? What's his name again? I didn't stop walking. I just smiled wider. Deborah leaned in. Do you want to go? I shook my head. No, they need to see me here. Present? Grounded. We reached our table. Deborah pulled my chair out for me like he always did. He was quiet, watching me with a look that wasn't pity, but something heavier. Disappointment. For them, not for me. Midway through the meal, I excused myself. The restroom was down a hallway past the kitchen. I locked the stall and pulled out my phone. List of people I don't owe explanations to, I typed in the Notes app. The list got longer with each breath. After dessert, I found my moment. I asked the event manager for a private side room, quiet, candlelit, tucked near the back. I told Deborah to wait at the table. Then I approached Mom and Annie. I need a moment, just the two of you. Mom raised an eyebrow but followed. Annie trailed, still clutching her glass. Inside the room, I shut the door. No small talk, I said. They waited. You've let people believe this isn't my wedding, I began. And I'm starting to believe you prefer it that way. Mom frowned. It's just chatter, Tanya. People assume things. Why do you let it get to you? Annie smirked, lifting her glass. Maybe you're just not radiating bride energy. I took a breath. Let the sting settle. You're right, I said softly. I'm radiating something else. Boundaries. I pulled 2 envelopes from my purse and handed one to each of them. Inside is a list of terms, names to uninvite, decor that needs to go, script changes. This is not negotiable. Mom opened hers immediately, scanning the list. Tanya, she started, you can't dictate. I can, I cut in. And I am, Annie scoffed. What if we just ignore this? I stepped closer. Then I walk, literally, in the middle of the ceremony if I have to. Mom's jaw tightened. You wouldn't. Try me. Back at the table, I sipped the rest of my wine without saying much. My phone buzzed with a calendar alert for the final venue walkthrough. I dismissed it. That night, I called the officiant from the couch while Deborah folded laundry nearby. Hey, Tanya, she answered. Everything still on track? I need to confirm you're using the script I originally sent, not any version passed through my mother. She paused. I have your original. Haven't touched it. Good. Please don't let anyone else edit it. No last-minute changes. You have my word. After we hung up, I sat down at my laptop and pulled up the seating chart software. I removed Mom and Annie from the front row, moved them to a corner table far from the aisle. I didn't do it out of spite. I did it for clarity. Then I sent a message to Marcia, the venue coordinator. All further decisions must be approved via email by Tanya J. Please do not accept verbal updates from anyone else. I closed my laptop and turned to Deborah. If I have to go through with this, I said, I'm doing it as myself, not their accessory. He smiled faintly. You've never been anyone's accessory, T. I smiled back, but didn't reply. Some lies were easier to swallow than others. The next morning, as I poured coffee and checked my phone, I saw a story posted by one of Annie's friends. A boomerang of champagne glasses, a glitter filter, and the caption, The engagement party of the year kicks off tomorrow. No mention of a wedding, no mention of me. I stared at the screen for a long time, then whispered, They think I'm still bluffing. I walked upstairs and took the carry-on from the closet. This time, I started packing. The morning of the final walkthrough arrived with a sky full of Charleston haze, that kind of sleepy gray that made everything feel muted. I'd barely slept the night before, and Deborah didn't push me to talk as we drove. We both knew there wasn't much left to say. At the venue, Marcia, the coordinator, greeted us with her clipboard and usual pep. We've got the flowers arriving in an hour, the string quartet's already rehearsing, and the cake just got delivered. Want to see it? I nodded, hoping, desperately, that maybe, just maybe, this part had gone untouched. We stepped into the reception hall. The air was cold from the AC, the windows fogging slightly from the contrast outside. And there, in the center of the room, under a spotlight like a stage prop, stood the cake. 3 tiers. pastel blue with ivory accents, delicate sugar flowers curled along the edges. It was beautiful, but it wasn't mine. I had chosen cream and gold. Peonies. A simple design, understated and clean. This wasn't simple. I stepped closer and saw the words piped in elegant cursive. Congratulations, Annie Mark. Not Tanya Deborah. Not even my name. My voice didn't crack. Marcia, who signed off on this? She froze. Your mom came by yesterday. She said the bride approved the change. Deborah, beside me, stiffened. I reached into my purse, pulled out my phone, and opened the original invoice I had saved weeks ago. I handed it to her. This was the design, the message, the flower choice. Marcia stared at the screen, then the cake, then back to me. I'm so sorry, Tanya. It's not just the cake, I said, louder than I intended. It's the narrative. The kind of statement you carve in stone when no one hears you the first time. That evening, the welcome dinner was set up on the back lawn, string lights crisscrossing above long farmhouse tables. The air was warm, with a faint scent of honeysuckle riding the breeze. It could have been beautiful. Could have. Midway through the meal, after the first round of drinks, Mark stood up, tapping his wine glass with a spoon. The clink rang out across the lawn. I just want to take a moment, he said, to thank Elizabeth and Barbara for throwing such a perfect engagement event for Annie and me. Forks paused mid-air. A hush settled. Deborah's fingers clenched around his napkin. I felt the breath leave my body. Mark smiled wide. It means so much to us, really. We're so grateful. Elizabeth chimed in like she'd been waiting. It's been such a joyful surprise, hasn't it? I think everyone agrees. It was exactly what this weekend needed. No one corrected them. Not a single person. And Annie? She just sat there, beaming, like it had always been hers to begin with. I didn't say a word. I didn't cry. I didn't even clench my jaw. I stood up, quietly, stepped away from the table. Deborah stood to follow, but I held up one hand. Let me. I walked past the servers, through the sliding glass doors, into the kitchen. It smelled of garlic and sweat and stress. The cooks barely glanced at me. Mark and Annie were in the back corner, chatting with one of the cousins. I walked straight to them. Mark? I said. He looked up, startled. Hey, Tanya, great night, huh? You owe me an apology. He blinked. What? This wasn't your event. You hijacked it, and now you're standing in my story like it was always yours. He glanced at Annie. I thought, your mom said it was all part of the surprise. I turned to Annie. You really didn't think this would blow back on you? She shrugged, eyes cold. You're blowing it out of proportion. You always do. That sentence, like a trigger, like a match to dry grass. I didn't raise my voice. Every time I draw a line, you call it drama. Every time I claim something, you say I'm difficult. But here's the truth. You've never had to earn anything in this family. You just show up, and it's yours. Annie looked away. Mark awkwardly sipped his wine. Around us, the kitchen continued like nothing happened. But inside me, something shifted. I left them standing there, walked out the back door, and found Deborah leaning on the porch railing. Done? He asked. For now. We got into the car in silence, the kind of silence that didn't need explaining. A few minutes into the drive, I spoke. This isn't a misunderstanding anymore. It's a replacement. Deborah didn't ask what I meant. He didn't have to. When we got home, I opened my laptop and sent 3 emails, one to the venue, one to the decorator, one to the officiant. Subject lines were the same. New authorization protocol. Body. All changes must be approved through Tanya J. No verbal confirmations allowed. No third-party decisions. Then I drafted a message to the original guest list. Due to several unplanned changes, please refer to the updated invitation to clarify the purpose of this celebration. We thank you for your understanding. I removed Annie and Mark from the speech entirely, deleted every mention of surprise. The celebration might still happen, but not the way they planned it, not on my silence. Later that night, as I rinsed off my makeup and tied my hair into a loose bun, my phone buzzed with a voicemail. It was Mom. Tanya, you need to stop overreacting. You're embarrassing yourself. This was supposed to be joyful. You've always made things harder than they needed to be. Maybe if you smiled more, people would understand you better. I stood at the sink, water running, the message still playing. Then I hit delete, looked up at my reflection, and whispered, I'm not embarrassed. You are. The rehearsal space was already buzzing when I walked in, the air thick with flowers and chatter and last-minute logistics. I stayed toward the back, watching from a distance while the event team ran through the program with the MC, a woman named Dana who had the voice of a daytime TV anchor and the memory of a goldfish. She stood at the front with her iPad, skimming notes. Okay, so we'll begin with a brief welcome, followed by a special toast for Annie and Mark, she said, almost cheerfully. Then we move into the bridal procession. My hand went up, slow but sharp. Sorry, what toast? She turned. The opening toast? For Annie and Mark? My silence said more than a shout would have. Dana fumbled slightly. Your mother sent over the updated version. It's all approved. I opened my email and scrolled. The version I had sent her a week ago, with my initials, my notes, my structure, was gone. Replaced. New timestamp. No explanation. I closed my phone. Let me be clear, I said calmly. If anything is spoken tomorrow that I haven't personally signed off on, the mic gets turned off. You will not freelance at my wedding. Dana blinked. Of course. No problem. I didn't smile. I wasn't here to negotiate. Later that afternoon, just as I sat down to finalize the vendor confirmations, an email popped up from the photography team. Final invoice. The premium package I'd paid for had been removed, downgraded to the basic. I called them immediately. Hi, this is Tanya Jackson. I just received the invoice. There's a mistake. A pause. Actually, your mother requested we shift the extra coverage over to focus more on the surprise engagement announcement. I laughed. Not from humor, from exhaustion. I didn't authorize that. Another pause. We were under the impression. You were misled, I interrupted. Check your records. I sent a deposit. I signed a contract. Reinstate the premium coverage now and send a revised confirmation. Yes, ma'am. After hanging up, I called Deborah. Are you okay? He asked. I'm not getting erased, I said. Not this time. The next morning, I stood in the venue's main hall with my own videographer, a quiet woman with sharp eyes and no interest in gossip. I paid her out of pocket. Your job, I told her, is to document me. Not a fantasy, not a surprise. Me. She nodded. Understood. By noon, I had set a meeting with the core team, MC Dana, Marcia from the venue, and Carl, the head of catering. We sat around a small table in the back lounge, and I slid across printed documents, one for each of them. These are your instructions, I said. There are no addendums, no substitutions, no last-minute revisions unless they come through me, in writing. Marcia looked them over. Understood. Carl asked, any changes to the menu? No. But any food station or signage that references Annie and Mark is to be removed. Dana raised an eyebrow. And if someone objects? Then they're welcome to host their own event. But this is mine. I paused, then continued. Also, Annie and Mark are not to have speaking roles unless I invite them to speak. They do not toast. They do not interrupt. Dana leaned back. That may raise some eyebrows. I didn't blink. Let them rise. Just as the meeting wrapped, my phone buzzed. A group text from Annie. Why are you making this harder than it needs to be? You're ruining the vibe. I stared at the message, then typed my reply. You can have the vibe. I'm keeping the vows. Deborah and I sat in the empty ceremony space afterward, just the two of us. The chairs weren't set up yet. The air was still. For once. He looked at me with a softness I hadn't seen in days. Whatever happens, he said, I'm proud of you for standing up. I didn't stand up, I said. I just stopped kneeling. That evening, just before sunset, I went for my final dress fitting. This time, it was only me and Simone. My maid of honor, my anchor, my proof that not every connection in life is transactional. The boutique was quiet, the city outside muffled. I stepped into the dress and let the zipper close behind me. Simone pulled the mirror around, and I stared at myself. The dress fit like armor. "They can have the party," I whispered. "I'll own the silence." Simone's eyes met mine in the mirror. "Then let's make sure that silence is unforgettable." We laughed, just enough to loosen the weight. Back home, I tossed my shoes near the door and headed upstairs. Deborah was on the couch, laptop open, watching highlights from a game. "Need anything?" he asked. "I'm good." As I plugged in my phone, a notification buzzed onto the screen, an Instagram story from one of Annie's friends. A photo of champagne glasses clinking, a sparkle filter flashing over them. Text: 12 hours until the moment of her dreams. My name wasn't mentioned. Again. I stared at it for a long beat, then opened a new message to Marcia. "Cancel the surprise segment in the evening program," I typed. "Replace it with 5 minutes of silence." I sat alone in the prep room. The lace of my veil fell over my shoulders like a ghost I had finally invited to stay. The noise of the venue buzzed faintly beyond the closed door, caterers hustling, chairs being shifted, muffled chatter that no longer held my name. I looked at the clock. 1 hour to ceremony. My hands rested in my lap, palms warm despite the chill in the room. I hadn't cried, not even once. There was no space left for tears. Only steel. Only choices. The door opened, and Deborah stepped in. He didn't say anything right away. Just looked at me. Really looked. Then he knelt beside me and reached for my hand. "You don't have to go through with it," he said, voice low and solid. "But if you do, I'll be right there." I met his eyes. "Then we walk in together, and we don't stop for anyone." He nodded, and I could see the pride in his eyes, not just love but respect. That mattered more. As he helped me stand, I adjusted my veil, looked in the mirror, and whispered to myself, "This isn't a wedding anymore, it's a reckoning." The music started exactly as planned. The venue coordinator signaled the beginning. The guests shifted in their chairs. A few turned, expecting to see a flower girl or perhaps a solo violinist, maybe even the start of some Pinterest-inspired prelude. Instead, the MC stepped up to the microphone and cleared her throat. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, hesitating just long enough to catch attention. "Before we begin, the bride has requested 5 minutes of silence." A ripple went through the crowd. Whispers, confused glances, one audible gasp. But no one said anything out loud. Deborah and I entered from the side, walking slowly down the center aisle, not with the grand flourish of music or scattered petals, but side by side, in quiet resolve. There were no bridesmaids, no groomsmen, just us. When we reached the front, the screen behind us flickered on. A timer appeared. 5 minutes. 300 seconds. The countdown began. People fidgeted. I stood tall, my eyes locked with my mother's. Then Annie's. Neither smiled. I didn't blink. The silence swallowed the room like smoke. Thick, heavy, unavoidable. Children stopped whispering. Chairs creaked under restrained movement. Somewhere near the back, someone coughed. And still, we stood. I had considered giving a speech. I had written 3. But none of them matched the power of silence when the room expected a script. When the timer finally hit 0, I exhaled through my nose, just once. Then I nodded to the officiant. We didn't break tradition. We replaced it. The ceremony continued. We exchanged vows. Simple, clean, no embellishments. Deborah's voice trembled only once when he said, "You are the only version of me I want to be." The room stayed quiet. Even applause was restrained, controlled. After the recessional, I walked straight toward the back hallway. I didn't wait for photos. I didn't pose for family portraits. I didn't want memories built on facades. In the side room, Elizabeth was already pacing. When I entered, she turned sharply. "What was that stunt?" I closed the door gently behind me. "A statement. You embarrassed everyone. Do you know how many people were confused? Whispering? I hope they were. She crossed her arms. You think this was brave? You made it awkward. You turned your own wedding into a protest. That silence was the only honest part of today, I said. Her jaw clenched. Annie needed this more than you did. You're strong. She isn't. And there it was. The oldest lie told by those who fear boundaries. I stepped closer. That's why you broke me quietly. You thought I wouldn't break out loud. The door opened again. Annie walked in, phone still in her hand. You've always been the dramatic one, Tanya. I turned to her. No. When I've just finally stopped being obedient. She rolled her eyes. So this is your rebellion? Making people uncomfortable? No. This is my wedding. And you made it yours. All I did was reclaim it. Elizabeth tried to interrupt. I held up my hand. I'm not discussing this anymore. You've had your say for 34 years. You won't get another microphone. And with that, I left the room. Back in the reception area, guests were stirring with a different kind of energy. There were questions, sure, but also nods, half smiles, and glances that didn't feel as judgmental as I feared. One of my aunts came up, rested her hand gently on my shoulder. What you did, she said, was brave. I nodded. It was necessary. Across the room, I saw Deborah with the videographer, pointing toward the ceremony space. Did you get all of it? He asked her. She nodded. Every second. Good, I said, approaching them. Let them play that at the next family gathering. The videographer laughed, but I didn't smile. I meant every word. That night, when we got back to the hotel, a group message buzzed through on my phone. It was from a cousin in Ohio, then another from an aunt in Savannah, then my brother, who hadn't made it to the ceremony at all. Each message read the same way. What exactly happened at your ceremony? We're confused. I sat on the edge of the bed, phone in hand. I typed a response, deleted it, typed again, deleted again. Then finally, I sent one sentence. Silence speaks when love has been muted. The morning after the ceremony, I woke up in the hotel bed beside Deborah, the veil from yesterday still folded on the chair in the corner. The air in the room was heavy with quiet, not silence, but that lingering hum of aftermath, the kind that settles between people who know something irreversible has happened. Neither of us spoke at first. We just lay there, both staring at the ceiling like it might answer something. I reached for my phone. Messages. Dozens of them. Some were supportive, short, and soft. I'm proud of you. You were powerful. That was brave. Others. Not so much. Is everything okay? What was that? Was that performance art? The video was everywhere. A guest had live-streamed the entire 5 minutes of silence. Now it was circulating with captions like, most awkward wedding ever, and bride sends icy message to family. It didn't stop there. I opened another link someone had forwarded. A clip from the tribute video, meant to be a celebration of our relationship, was going viral for a different reason, because it didn't show me at all. Just Annie and Mark, holding hands, laughing in golden hour light, a soundtrack of piano overlaid beneath the words, a love story worth celebrating. I watched it twice. Then I closed the video, set my phone down, and looked at Deborah. Let the world see what I've always seen, I said. He didn't ask what I meant. He already knew. An hour later, the phone rang again. Elizabeth. I stared at the screen, thumb hovering. Then I answered. What were you thinking? She demanded. You embarrassed the entire family. Do you have any idea what people are saying about us? I've seen, I said simply. She launched into a monologue I'd heard versions of my entire life. All I've ever done was try to keep this family together. I've carried the weight. I've been the bridge. And this is how you repay me? I didn't ask for a bridge, I said. I asked for a seat at the table. She scoffed. You've always been cold, Tanya, so hard to reach. I see that now. I closed my eyes. No, you just never liked the version of me that didn't say yes. There was a pause. Then she hung up. Later that afternoon, I opened Instagram. I shouldn't have, but I did. Annie had posted a photo, her in a white dress, a candid shot of Mark kissing her temple. The caption read, "It's sad when someone chooses drama over joy." It had over 200 comments already. "You were glowing. So happy for you, Annie. Shame the vibe got ruined." My inbox filled again. Some people sent hearts. Others asked for an explanation. Some didn't even pretend to be neutral. But then, something unexpected happened. A friend from high school, someone I hadn't spoken to in years, sent me a private message. "Hey, I just wanted to say, I watched the video. I'm sorry your day got hijacked." But I admire the silence. It was powerful. I wish I'd had the guts to do something like that when my family tried to override my wedding. I stared at the message, took a breath. Then Deborah walked in with 2 mugs of tea. "You look like you just read a battle report," he said. In a way, I did. He handed me the mug. "Let them talk," he said gently. "You don't have to explain truth to people looking for fiction." That night, I sat on the balcony with my laptop. No fancy captions, no stories. Just a post, a photo of the original wedding invitation, the one with my name, my date, our design, and the caption, "Sometimes silence isn't empty, it's full of everything they ignored." I didn't tag anyone, I didn't respond to the comments. I let it sit, like a mirror. A few hours later, the views started rolling in. Quiet ones. No fanfare. Just quiet, deliberate resonance. Then, the next morning, as I sat down with Deborah over toast and eggs neither of us really touched, my phone buzzed again. A new message, from a verified account. A major wedding blog. "We'd love to feature your story. We think it'll resonate with women everywhere. Let us know if you'd be open to an interview." I stared at the screen, then typed back, "Only if I get to write it myself." When I opened my laptop the morning after the silence, I was met with chaos. My inbox looked like it had been struck by lightning. Hundreds of unread messages, links, tags, mentions. Notifications spilled across the screen faster than I could clear them. Someone had reposted the 5-minute video. A wedding blogger with a following bigger than my entire high school had shared it with the caption, "The most powerful moment from a wedding this year." The post had thousands of comments and hundreds of thousands of views within hours. And it wasn't just the wedding crowd. A parenting forum, a women's leadership page, even a podcast account had reshared it. I wasn't sure whether to laugh or throw up. Deborah walked in holding 2 mugs of coffee. He didn't say a word at first, just placed mine beside the keyboard and sat on the arm of the couch. "I didn't expect applause," I said after a long moment. "I just didn't want to disappear." He nodded. "You didn't." And now everyone else sees it. Articles began popping up within hours. "Bride breaks tradition with unspoken protest." "When a wedding isn't really yours." 5 minutes that said what words couldn't. I didn't read all of them, but I skimmed enough to know the narrative had shifted, and for once, it wasn't written by someone else. But not all the attention was kind. Later that afternoon, I received a text from Dad. Short, cold. "You've made your point. Maybe now it's time to let it go. This is tearing the family apart." I stared at it for a long time, the gall it took to reduce the entire erosion of boundaries, disrespect, and hijacking of my wedding to family tension. I typed, "Dad, the family was torn long before the ceremony." He replied 5 minutes later, "Then you've made it worse." I didn't answer. I reread it, deleted the entire thread. Deborah came back into the room, reading my face like a weather report. He didn't ask what it said. He just sat down beside me and said, "They only call it division when the quiet one speaks up." That was all the validation I needed. Later that night, I did something I hadn't done in years. I wrote, not in my journal, not a vent, a draft. I emailed the wedding blog editor directly. They had sent a request to feature my story, and I had ignored it, until now. "Happy to contribute," I wrote, "but only if I get to write it myself." The editor responded within an hour. "We'd be honored." So I did. I titled it, "How to Watch Yourself Fade from Your Own Wedding and What to Do Next." I wrote about the missing name on the invitation, the swapped cake, the edited photos, the whispers at the tables, the captioned engagement posts, the silence. I ended the piece with, "Silence is the hardest sound to make when you've spent a lifetime being quiet, but it's also the clearest." It was published 2 days later. By then, the comments on Annie's social media had started to shift. At first, it was pity and praise, but slowly, as screenshots circulated, as the article spread, the questions came. Wait, wasn't this Tanya's wedding? I saw the original invite. This is wild. She hijacked it and still wants to play victim? Then it turned. Annie disabled comments. Then she deleted the post. Then her account. Elizabeth, in turn, told a local paper she had been misunderstood. That family dynamics are complicated, and this is not something to air in public. I never said a word, never made a follow-up statement. I let my piece sit where I left it. Deborah and I sat at the kitchen table that afternoon, sipping tea. A soft breeze came through the screen door, carrying the scent of spring rain. "That's the thing about truth," I said. "It doesn't need a microphone, it just needs a moment." He smiled. "And you gave it 5. A few days later, I received a letter. Handwritten. No return address, but the handwriting was unmistakable. Annie. I opened it slowly, expecting rage or maybe sarcasm. Instead, it was one line. "You think you won, but all you did was divide us forever." I folded the letter neatly, walked into the guest room, pulled out the small drawer where I'd stored old RSVP cards, rehearsal notes, and seating charts that never saw daylight. I placed the letter in an envelope and labeled the drawer, "Unsent Invitations." Then I closed it. For good. It had been exactly 32 days since the wedding, though I wasn't counting, at least not consciously. I knew it only because the date kept popping up on reminders I hadn't disabled. Floral pickup, vendor reviews, honeymoon follow-ups. Each time I saw one, I clicked delete without hesitation. I sat in the back corner of the Palmetto Bookhouse, a small cafe tucked inside an old bookstore downtown. It smelled like roasted espresso beans and printed paper, the kind of scent that makes you feel both comforted and sharp. Deborah sat across from me, laptop open, earbuds in, tapping occasionally on his keyboard. We had settled into a quiet rhythm. I was working on a new essay, not about weddings, not even about family. It was about women learning to hold their space without apology. The editor from the blog had introduced me to 2 podcast hosts and another digital magazine, all asking for written contributions. I said yes to the ones that let me write unfiltered. No edits. No diluted tone. As I typed, my words flowing more easily now than they ever had, I recalled what my therapist had said on our last call. "You didn't destroy the family, Tanya. You broke the cycle." Healing didn't come with applause. It came in the quiet choices no one clapped for. And in those still moments, like the one I sat in now, coffee cooling beside me, I realized something fundamental. My silence hadn't been a retreat. It had been a declaration. I had not walked away from them. I had walked toward myself. I hadn't spoken to Elizabeth or Annie since Annie's letter, the one-liner she had sent like a dart. "You think you won, but all you did was divide us forever." I hadn't responded. What was there to say? The message said more about her than about me. My Aunt Janice, who had always floated at the edges of family drama, called me a week after the letter arrived. We spoke for nearly an hour. "It's lonelier, isn't it?" she said softly. "But it's cleaner now, too. Like finally living in a house without mold in the walls." I smiled. Exactly that. Mom had tried to regain footing, reaching out through other family members, dropping just checking in messages through Janice or my brother. But I didn't bite. If she wanted reconciliation, she would have to call it by name. And she hadn't. Annie never apologized. Instead, she posted vague story updates, retweets of relationship quotes dripping with passive aggression, all aimed in my direction without saying it directly. I didn't respond. I had nothing left to clarify. I used to think peace meant silence, that not speaking up was how you kept the family boat from tipping. But I had learned something better. Peace also means separation. And sometimes, letting go of someone is the kindest way to honor who they actually are. A few days later, Deborah and I picked up the final prints from the photographer I had hired on my own dime. It was just the two of us flipping through the leather-bound album in the living room. There were dozens of photos, me adjusting my veil, Deborah smiling as I walked toward him, a few intimate shots after the ceremony, no crowd, just us in the garden under the oaks. But one photo made me stop. It was a wide shot, taken from the back of the hall. I was standing alone on the stage, facing the crowd during the 5-minute silence. Deborah stood behind me, but the focus was on me, centered, lit by soft amber. My hands were folded, my shoulders back. I looked like someone I'd spent years trying to become. I placed a post-it on that page. This one. Deborah nodded. I already ordered the frame. We hung it above the fireplace the next evening. I didn't choose the photo of us smiling at the altar. That memory, while real, didn't speak to what I overcame. That photo did. The caption beneath the frame read, "The moment I met myself." As he handed me the final wrapped version before mounting it, Deborah added a note inside, "For the woman who refused to be forgotten." It wasn't bittersweet. It was powerful. A week later, I received a birthday card from Elizabeth. No note, no apology. Just a card with glittery letters that read, "Wishing you joy." I held it in my hand for 5 full minutes. Waiting, perhaps, for something more to appear. But the card stayed blank, except for the printed font. No handwriting, no warmth, no effort. I walked into the kitchen, opened the recycling bin, and dropped it in without a second thought. I didn't feel hurt, just done. I had learned that not every olive branch is sincere, and not every invitation deserves a reply. Some people don't earn a second chapter in your story just because they shared the first. That night, I lit a candle, turned off my phone, and curled up on the couch with a book I had meant to read for months. Deborah came in halfway through chapter 2 with 2 mugs of chamomile and a smile. "We good?" he asked, handing me the cup. "Yeah," I said. "Better than good." The next morning, while I was responding to emails, a notification popped up. Subject: National Women's Media Awards. Shortlist announcement. I opened it. "Congratulations! Your essay has been shortlisted for a national award recognizing authentic storytelling in modern media. Your voice matters, and we're honored to elevate it." I stared at the screen, not blinking, not smiling, just letting it settle in. Then I closed the laptop and whispered to myself, "They tried to silence me. Now they can't turn the volume down." The train into Manhattan hummed under my seat like a distant heartbeat, steady and unobtrusive. Outside the window, the skyline came into view, steel, glass, motion, and I felt more grounded than I had in months. I arrived at the venue early, dressed in a black pantsuit with tailored shoulders and quiet confidence. My makeup was minimal, my hair pulled back in the simple, strong bun my mother used to call too harsh. "You look like a lawyer heading into court," Deborah had said with a grin that morning. "No," I told him, "I look like someone who finally owns the script." The Women's Media Awards were held in a modest but elegant auditorium in Midtown, not a red carpet event, not glitzy, purposeful, the kind of room where words, not sequins, took center stage. When it was my turn, I walked onto the stage, heels echoing softly against the hardwood floor. I didn't carry notes. I didn't need them. I paused at the microphone, looked out at the sea of faces, and began. "I didn't lose a family," I said. "I released a performance." A murmur of response rippled through the crowd. "I didn't make a scene. I stepped off their script." The applause that followed wasn't roaring. It was real. Palms clapping not out of politeness but recognition. And though I couldn't see them, I knew my estranged family was watching. Elizabeth, likely frowning behind a glass of wine. Annie, maybe texting someone about how dramatic Tanya always is. But I wasn't speaking to them anymore. I was speaking for myself. 2 weeks later, my open letter was published in a national magazine. It ran online first, then in print, and was picked up by countless platforms. I titled it, "To the Women Who Were Told to Be Quiet at Their Own Celebration." I didn't write it to retaliate. I wrote it to document, to remember, to make a space for others who had swallowed words to keep someone else comfortable. In it, I detailed the journey, not in bitterness, but in clarity. The invite, the cake, the dress, the silence, the live stream, the audience that grew because I stopped pretending. I ended the piece with this: "If no one invites you to the table, build your own damn banquet." The line was quoted, screenshotted, shared. Elizabeth didn't respond, not directly, but a mutual relative told me she called it an exaggerated reinterpretation. Annie posted a vague story the same day the article went live. "Some people only heal by hurting others." I said aloud to my laptop screen, "Projection is loudest when no one's listening back." And I kept typing. A month later, I threw the only celebration I've ever truly chosen. It wasn't a wedding redo, it wasn't revenge, it was recognition. I rented a small event space in the city, a quiet rooftop with no florals, no white tablecloths, no string quartets, just clean lines, soft lighting, and people who showed up because they saw me, not because I fit into someone else's family narrative. I invited friends, colleagues, and even a few strangers who had written to me after the silence video went viral. The dress code was simple: wear whatever makes you feel most yourself. There was no DJ. Instead, I hired a spoken word artist to read excerpts from some of the letters I'd received, the kind that started with, "I thought I was the only one." It wasn't loud, but it was alive. Deborah stood beside me the entire evening, not as a figurehead or a prop, but as my partner. He didn't need a title to take up space beside me, he just belonged there. When it came time for the toast, I stood at the front with my glass of elderflower sparkling water, no champagne, no pretense. "To the day I became impossible to forget," I said. They clinked their glasses softly. It wasn't an ovation. It was validation. When the celebration ended, people lingered, not out of obligation, but ease. Some hugged, some left notes. Some simply looked at me and smiled like they'd been waiting for someone else to say what they'd always known. As we were leaving, Deborah and I found a flower arrangement at the door. No card, no name. Orchids and lilies, the kind my mother favored. I picked it up, turned it over once, then smiled. I didn't take it inside. Instead, I carried it to the compost bin behind the building and placed it gently on top. Not with malice, with finality. "I don't need to know who sent it," I told Deborah. "If they couldn't stand beside me, they don't get to reach for me now." He didn't say anything, just walked with me toward the street, hands tucked into his pockets, content in the quiet. The night was warm. A soft wind moved through the trees. I took off my heels, carrying them in one hand, my other hand wrapped around his. We walked slowly toward the car, but before we reached it, I turned to look back at the venue. Its lights were dimming, the rooftop now empty. "They made it about her engagement," I said. He turned to me, brows lifted. I smiled, whispering the rest. I turned it into my emancipation. He laughed under his breath, kissed the side of my head, and whispered back, "And you did it without raising your voice." I took one last look at the place behind me. Then I stepped into the streetlight,